As I sit down at the table in the corner of the small diner, I check my watch. It's just after 1 in the morning. It had taken me longer to get here than I anticipated, mostly because of a 4-car accident near the off-ramp of the highway. Even with that delay, though, I've somehow managed to arrive 20 minutes ahead of schedule. And yet, Pembrook still got here first. I mentally go back through the many times that I've met with him in person, trying to think of a single time that he hasn't been waiting for me when I arrive. Try as I might, though, I can't come up with a single time. It's simultaneously amusing and annoying. He remains silent as the waitress comes over to the table. There's already a cup of coffee and a slice of pie sitting in front of him. He had been here long enough to order and be served. I'm tempted to simply order dessert as he has, as if that would somehow put us on the same level in some small way, but I quickly dismiss the idea. I'm hungry, and there's no point in staying that way just to satisfy my ego. I order a steak and coffee, and the waitress shuffles off to the kitchen. Pembrook is watching me. I return his gaze, and for a while we just sit there in silence. This is also a common occurrence when meeting him. I don't know this for sure, but I think that he uses silence to both unnerve the other person and to emphasize his words when he does speak. I return his wordless gaze. As much as I don't like dealing with Pembrook, there's no doubt in my mind that he saved my life all those years ago when we first met. He did it for his own reasons, of course. Everything he does is for his own benefit. That doesn't change the fact that he stopped me from going down a much, much darker path than the one that I'm currently on. When I was a teenager, my condition first manifested. Screw it, there's no need for subtlety. That's when I discovered that I'm a lycanthrope, a werewolf, whatever you want to call it. Roughly once a month, as dictated by the lunar cycle, my body goes through a massive change. When this happens, I'm not fully in control of myself. Everything sort of goes red, and while I'm still fully conscious of what I'm doing, it's like I'm running on autopilot. That's when the blood flows all around me. It was worse when I was younger. The killing never seemed to fully satisfy the bloodlust that my condition brings with it. Even when I wasn't the wolf, I would have these urges to kill. I resisted them, but with each cycle they grew stronger and stronger. It got to the point where I began to develop physical symptoms. I like to think that I would have been able to hold out, but if I'm being honest with myself, I know that I wasn't far off from giving in to the need to slaughter. Just before that happened, Pembrook found me. He knew far more about my condition than I did, almost a frightening amount more. He told me that the reason the killing urge was staying with me was because the wolf part of me was dissatisfied. At its core, the wolf is a hunter, and random people are no match for it. It craves a challenge. When that craving isn't met, there are consequences for its host. Consequences for me, in other words. Pembrook didn't just come to me with an explanation. He also presented me with a solution. Every few months, he sends me information about a location somewhere in the country where there is more challenging prey. These places are usually home to some sort of inhuman creature that is terrorizing or otherwise harming the local population. I go to these places so that the wolf can satisfy its needs. The wolf doesn't even want to kill normal people anymore. It's had a taste of something more, and its appetite is insatiable. Normally he emails me the next place on a seemingly endless list, or occasionally passes along the information through a phone call. It's very rare that he opts for a face-to-face meeting. This usually indicates that the place that he's sending me comes with a complicated situation. Without a word, Pembrook reaches into a suit coat and takes out a small piece of folded parchment. Of course it's parchment. No simple paper for this man. He sets it down on the table and slides it towards me. Curious, I pick it up and unfold it. Broken Bend, Montana. That's all that's on the paper. I raise an eyebrow and look at Pembrook. He finally speaks. He tells me that Broken Bend is a small town even by Montana standards. Its location is isolated, and by all accounts the residents prefer it that way. Up until recently there hadn't been anything special about it at all. A year ago, though, There started to be signs that something unnatural was going on in the town. Pembrook says that he can't be more specific because he doesn't have any more details than that despite his efforts to learn more. That in itself is surprising. It isn't normal for him to be so uninformed about a topic. I can tell by the expression on his face that it bothers him, too. When I press him about it, he hesitantly informs me that he had already sent in 3 other associates in an attempt to get more information. They've all disappeared without a trace. No calls, no emails, no nothing. Just poof, gone. The human part of me finds that to be unsettling. The wolf part is excited by it. I refold the piece of paper and slide it back over to Pembrook. I'm going to do as he asks. Of course I am. I always do, not just because of any sense of debt that I feel towards him, but because he has never failed to come through with something that keeps the wolf satisfied and me from becoming a serial killer. Besides, although the apprehension isn't fading, I have to admit that the mysterious nature of this particular job has piqued my curiosity. No one really knows what lycanthropy is. Oh, sure, the symptoms of it are well known. Becoming a wolf-human hybrid during the full moon phase of the lunar cycle, intense rage, propensity to ridiculously high amounts of violence, all of that. What is yet to be successfully explained is what's actually going on in the person's body during all of this. There are some people that say it's a bonding of a human and wolf spirit, while others take the less romantic yet more scientific route of attributing it to some sort of virus or genetic mutation. There's no definitive answer. Whatever it is, one thing that I know for a fact is true is that the traits are shared between the human and the wolf. The wolf retains my ability to read and problem solve, for example. It works both ways, though. Ever since my condition became active, I've noticed that I've been more curious and eager to dive into mysteries in an attempt to unravel them. The old tales about cats and their curiosity were written by people that had never had a wolf living inside of them. Now that I've agreed to take on Pembrook's new business, there's a bit of old business that has to be addressed. I finish my food while he ignores his coffee and pie, and after paying the waitress, I lead him outside to my camper. Not for the first time, I notice his nose wrinkle in disapproval at the sight of the old brown and black vehicle. I have to admit that it really isn't much to look at. It's perfect for my needs, though, and I'm usually able to find cheap parts to repair it on the rare occasions that it breaks down. Before opening the side door, I take a quick glance around the parking lot to make sure that we're alone. It's not likely that anyone else is lurking around this early in the morning, but it never hurts to be careful. Satisfied, I unlock the door and swing it open. Sitting on the floor is a white cooler. I slide it out and set it down on the concrete before motioning for Pembrook to open it. He kneels down and flips the latch before sliding the top back. Inside the cooler, packed in plastic and ice, is a woman's jaw. The skin is still on it, and blood is frozen in place along its length. Attached to the jaw is a pink fleshy mass, the remainder of the neck and windpipe. Pembrook examines them closely like an archaeologist inspecting calcified bones. After a long moment, he nods and closes the cooler. As he walks away towards his extremely expensive black car with the cooler in hand, I find that I'm grateful to be rid of the thing. Remains inside of it are those of a banshee. This is the second one that I've hunted, and the process was just as unpleasant as it was the first time. The wolf enjoys a challenge, yes, and no one can argue that a banshee isn't a difficult hunt. They have superhuman strength and speed, and the flying part certainly doesn't make things easier. It's that damn scream that I hate, though. As a predator, the wolf's ears are extremely sensitive. You can only imagine what a supersonic scream sounds like through them. It's unpleasant, to say the least. I run a hand through my hair. It's all in the past. Now it's time to focus on the future, and that future lies in Broken Bend, Montana. I get in the camper and turn the engine over. I haven't been in Montana in a long time. As I pull out of the parking lot, I try to remember what I was hunting there during my last visit. Was that the Draugr? No, I'm pretty sure that was South Dakota, not Montana. It might have been the Nalusa Falea. Maybe. That doesn't seem right either. I sigh. Everything sort of blends together. Taking out my cell phone, I put Broken Bend into the map app. According to it, it's about a 12-hour drive there from where I'm currently at in Minnesota, assuming no stops or delays. I quickly do the math in my head. That gives me roughly 43 hours until the wolf comes out to play. During that time, I'll need to figure out exactly what's going on, find the source of whatever that is, and make sure that I have the wolf pointed in the right direction to, shall we say, solve the problem when the transformation begins. Not a lot of time, and I'm not exactly a detective. I'll just have to make it work somehow. It's cold outside, and I suspect that it will get colder when I reach Montana, but I put down the window anyway to let the air wash over me. At the same time, I crank the truck's heater as high as it goes. The wind will help keep me awake during the drive, while the heater will make sure that the wind won't freeze me to death while doing so. I drive all night. My first stop is in North Dakota just as the sun is rising over the horizon behind me, and that's only long enough to go to the bathroom and pick up some fast food. Fatigue is beginning to set in, but I've had enough long nights at this point to mostly ignore it. I can rest when I get to my destination. My second stop occurs as I cross into Montana. There's a travel center less than a mile past the border, and I pull the truck off the highway and park it in one of the many open parking spaces. I get out and take a few minutes to stretch out some kinks before going inside. I immediately make a beeline towards a tall rack of maps. I found over the years that while online maps and GPS are great tools to help me get where I'm going, they're often inaccurate when it comes to more remote locations. Sometimes locations of roads are mismarked or points have been updated after changes have been made. That's where an actual old-fashioned physical map really comes into its own. It's much easier to find different ways into a town when you don't have an electronic voice telling you to turn left into a cliff. I go over to one of the round white tables and open the map. It takes me a moment to locate the town that I'm looking for. I'm immediately glad that I made this stop. A number of the roads that the app had said were coming up aren't actually where they said they are. Score one for experience over technology, I guess. I return to my truck and pull back out onto the highway. I'm on the final stretch of the trip now, but judging by the terrain on the map, it promises to be the most difficult section. I'm going to be traveling through the mountains to reach my destination. Camper tends to struggle a bit on heavy inclines. My prediction turns out to be true. While I'm on the highway, it's an easy enough drive, but when I'm forced to turn off onto back roads that continue towards Broken Bend, the truck really begins to have issues. The steep hills force every ounce of power from its engine. Many of the roads can barely be called roads at all, and the dirt and rocks cause the truck to bounce all over the place. I breathe a heavy sigh of relief when a large green sign proclaiming "Welcome to Broken Bend" appears on the side of the road. Passing the sign, I almost immediately plunge into a thick forest. It's so dark under the trees that I have to turn on the truck's lights even though it's the middle of the afternoon. After a few minutes, I start to feel a bit nervous. There's no traffic in either direction, and being basically cocooned by the trees gives me the odd sense that I'm alone in the world. I shake the feeling off and continue on. The road turns slightly to the right. As I come around the corner, I find a huge tree trunk splitting the road in two about a dozen or so yards ahead of me. It's by far the largest tree that I've seen since entering Montana, and it looks like it was split right down the middle by a bolt of lightning at some point in its history. I can't help but smile slightly. With the tree splitting the path after the curve, it's a literal broken bend in the road. The founders of the town hadn't been very imaginative, apparently. The forest ends a couple of miles further down the road. I squint against the bright light as I emerge from under the trees. The road is at the top of a tall hill, and it's from this vantage point that I get my first good look at Broken Bend. The town rests at the base of a group of mountains. It isn't very large, but it looks incredibly pleasant and picturesque. To the left of the small downtown area is a large lake that sparkles as the sunlight dances on its surface. With the exception of the road leading towards the mountains, the entire place is surrounded by woods every bit as thick as the one I just passed through. I feel something stir deep within me. The wolf is uneasy. It doesn't feel like it's sensing any immediate danger, but more like there's something off about the town and the area around it that has caught its attention. It doesn't like what it's seeing. There's another feeling mixed in with that unease. I smile slightly as I guide the camper towards the buildings. It's eagerness. Whatever the wolf is sensing, it's excited at the prospect of encountering it. I'll just need to figure out what it is before the wolf comes out to play tomorrow evening. I don't doubt the wolf's instincts, but it's hard to imagine that there's something sinister going on at Broken Bend as I arrive downtown. Its buildings are older but well maintained, and the same can be said for the roads themselves. People walking to and from the local businesses seem normal at a first glance. Everything that I'm seeing looks a lot more Norman Rockwell than Stephen King. Spotting a bar, I pull the camper into a small gravel parking lot and get out. There's no point in delaying the start of my investigation, and I found that bars are always a good place to get information from the locals. Besides, I'm hungry. That's one of the less obvious downsides of my condition. There's something about it that makes me burn through calories at a faster rate than other people, even when I've just been driving all day. As a result, I eat more often and in higher quantities than someone my size typically would. No matter how much I consume, though, I stay thin, maybe too thin. My cell phone chimes as I'm walking around the side of the building towards the bar's front door. I take it out of my pocket and glance at the text message. It's from Pembrook. Deposit made. Send any updates. I nod to myself. To make sure that I'm as flexible as possible when it comes to the jobs he gives me, Pembrook pays me a monthly stipend. He basically has me on retainer. I also submit any expenses to him for reimbursement. In a strange way, Pembrook has managed to turn monster hunting and killing into a proper business. He's never told me where he gets the money from, and I've never asked. Judging by the way that he dresses and the car that he drives, along with the vibe his general demeanor gives off, it's obvious that he's wealthy. I'm not sure that I want to know how he came into that wealth, though. The bar is nicer than most of the ones I've been in. The walls are reclaimed wood that has been stained a pleasant brown, and the long bar's shiny surface matches the coloring. The lighting is dimmed, but not to the point of making things seem dark. There are half a dozen patrons inside. I suspect that number will grow when the surrounding businesses close for the day. There are a few tables in the center of the room and booths lining one of the walls, but I head directly for the bar. I'm here for information, and a small town's bartender is often the best source for that. They overhear a lot of interesting details from customers that have had a little too much to drink. The bartender is a pleasant man of about 60. He greets me with a smile and asks what I'd like to drink. I tell him that whatever's on tap is fine and asks to see a menu. He hands me one from under the counter and goes to get my beer. I tend not to drink much. When a normal person gets drunk, they get loud and sometimes a bit abrasive. When I get drunk, some of the wolf's more undesirable traits come to the surface and things get dangerous for the people around me. It's better for everyone that I stay sober. It would have seemed strange not to order alcohol in a bar, however, so I'll just have to be sure to keep myself to a 2-drink maximum. I end up ordering the largest burger on the menu as well as a side of chicken wings. Not only do I need to eat more than most people, I also require more protein. The result is that my food consumption makes the caveman diet look vegan. As I eat, I strike up a conversation with the bartender. I intentionally keep it light. Going right for the hard questions is a good way to raise suspicions and clamp mouths shut. Things quickly take an unexpected turn. After the first few minutes, the bartender smoothly turns the conversation to focus on me. Where I'm from, why I'm in town, that sort of thing. I don't let on that I've noticed, but out of the corner of my eye I see 2 of the patrons that have been seated in the booth sit down at the far end of the bar. Either life in Broken Bend is so dull that a single random stranger is seen as a major change of pace, or something more threatening is starting to happen. I try to diffuse things before they start. Typically, I'm not a great liar, but on the way to town I had carefully crafted a cover story involving me being a writer that is traveling around doing research for a book that takes place in a small Montana town. I tell the bartender that I'm from New York, so I feel that I need to actually experience what I'm writing about to make it come off as authentic. When he asks why I chose Broken Bend, I give a small shrug and tell him that I simply picked a random spot off the map. I make it a point to slip in an almost offhanded comment that my editor has approved of my plan. The amount of attention that I'm receiving after less than half an hour in the bar is unsettling, and I want to make my son and admirers know that someone outside of Broken Bend knows where I am. It's a small precaution, and it's completely dependent on how much these people are believing my story. It's still better than nothing. Another person has come to the bar. It's time to end this, get some distance, and come up with a different way to proceed. I don't like where this situation is heading. I pay for my food, thank the bartender, and go back outside. To my surprise, no one tries to stop me. I can feel the eyes of the bar patrons on me, though, and I hurry towards the camper and away from them. When I reach the parking lot, I find a man dressed in a sheriff's uniform waiting for me. He's leaning up against the camper and staring at me silently. The hand that rests on his gun communicates all that needs to be said. He identifies himself as Sheriff Paul Garrett. He tells me that he's responding to a call his office received about a drunk stranger making a scene inside the bar. Nothing had happened while I was in there, of course. I know that. It's quite clear that the sheriff knows that as well. He's using this false claim as an excuse. He asks to see my identification, and I slowly take my wallet out of my pocket so that I can produce my driver's license. I hand it over to him and wait as he examines it closely. Best case scenario, he gives me a few veiled threats and points me out of town. Glance down at his gun again. The worst case scenario is something that I really don't want to think about. The wolf stirs inside of me. I'm not without ways in defending myself. I might not have the superhuman abilities of the wolf more than once a month, but I know how to fight, and I'm willing to go to the extremes that most people aren't. I don't like to kill. Doesn't mean that I'm a stranger to it, and that I won't do it again if necessary. Hopefully it won't come to that, though. Killing a cop, even one in such a remote town, will raise all kinds of alarms and create a wide variety of new problems for me. Things have accelerated way too quickly. I've been in Broken Bend for less than an hour, and I'm already in a position where I'm actually considering killing the sheriff. Garrett asked me how much I had to drink while I was in the bar. I respond truthfully that I had a single beer. He regards me for a long moment as he slowly rotates my license in his fingers. I remain silent, fully aware that he's looking for something to use against me. Eventually he tells me that the person who had called in the complaint said that it was at least 6 drinks, that based on what he was seeing, he believed the caller. There's a hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. It's both amused and mocking. It confirms to me that there was only one way this conversation was ever going to go. A loud creaking noise from behind me breaks the silence. I glance over my shoulder and see the patrons from the bar coming out of the building's back door. All of them have that same look of smug viciousness that's plastered on Garrett's face. As they start to surround me, I take a step to my right, but the sheriff taps his gun and I have to stop moving. The bar patrons come at me as a group while the sheriff watches. Screw the gun. I'm not letting anyone take me without a fight. I lash out at the first man that reaches me, use my forearm to smash him in the face. I feel bone and cartilage crunch as his nose shatters. He stumbles backwards, blood running down over his hands as he moans in pain. Deep inside of me, the wolf growls its approval. My sudden violence surprises my attackers, and they hesitate. It's all that I need to turn my attention to the next closest and grab his arm. Before he can react, I bring my foot down hard on the inside of his leg. There's an audible snap as he crumbles to the ground, screaming and grabbing at his now broken fibula. I bare my teeth at the rest of the men and ask who's next. It's all bravado. The hope is that my confident-sounding challenge encourages the 3 remaining bar patrons to come at me one at a time instead of as a group. This works for one of them. He charges towards me as he attempts to tackle me to the ground. I take a step back and use his own momentum to drive him downward. His face connects with the gravel parking lot where he lays motionless. He's been knocked unconscious. At least, I think he's just unconscious. It was a pretty hard hit. The other two are smart enough to come at me at the same time. I do my best to keep them off of me. There's only so much that I can do to protect myself. I take a few hard shots to my side. Doubling over in pain, I try to suck the air back in my lungs as I force them off of me and back up. Unless I come up with something fast, this isn't going to end well for me. There's a sharp stabbing sensation in the side of my neck. I twist away from it and turn towards the direction it came from. Standing a few feet away from me, a hypodermic needle in his hand. It's Garrett. The plunger is pushed in. The fucker injected me with something. My limbs immediately start to feel heavy. I stumble on the gravel and fall down to one knee. The two guys from the bar jump on me and flatten me to the ground. I don't put up much of a fight. Whatever is pumping through my veins is making my body unresponsive and is on the verge of shutting me down entirely. My eyelids droop as everything starts to go black. I give one last token attempt at moving before I pass out completely. Consciousness doesn't come back to me easily. My mind swims in and out of the dark place it finds itself in, sometimes towards the speck of light that is the outside world and sometimes away from it. I don't have any control over it. I just float around in this near-perfect void, a passenger on its black currents. I feel sharp teeth on the back of my neck. Suddenly I'm headed rapidly for the light. It grows larger and brighter with each passing moment as the wolf drags me back towards the living world. I silently thank it as a rushing sound fills my ears and my eyes snap open. I immediately shut them again to shield them from the blinding orange glow in front of me. Squinting, I allow my eyes time to adjust to the light before opening them all the way. Less than 10 feet in front of me is a large fire. Its flames shoot up above my head, and the heat from it blasts against my body. The smell of smoke fills my nostrils. Tearing my eyes away from it, I look around at my surroundings. Given the size of the fire, I'm surprised to find that I'm indoors. The room is built from a combination of wooden boards and stonework. There are markings on many of the boards, but it's difficult to make them out. It takes me a few moments to realize that I'm in a standing position. I shake my head in an attempt to clear it as I look up. My hands are tied over my head by a rope hanging down from a wood beam. It's just barely long enough for my feet to rest flat against the floor. I pull down on the rope, but all that accomplishes is making the knot pull slightly tighter against my skin. I don't know where I am, and I don't know why I've been brought here. There's no doubt that it's in my best interest to get the hell out of here, though. The indoor bonfire and the markings that I can't decipher imply some sort of ritual, and if I ride that train of thought to the next stop, that combined with my encounter with the bar patrons and sheriff screams cult. I lift my feet off the floor so that my full weight is pulling down on the rope. I hold myself like that for nearly a minute before giving up in frustration. Neither the rope nor the beam it's attached to are budging. Forcing myself to stay calm, I look up towards the ceiling and attempt to see exactly what's connecting the rope and beam. It's hard to tell for certain, but it looks like it's a thick hook of some kind. A plan starts to form. If I can swing myself far enough, maybe I can get the loop tied into the rope to slip up and off the hook. I lower my head as I mentally trace the angle that I'll need to swing at to make that a possibility. I narrow my eyes as I realize that the direction I'll need to go in is dangerously close to the fire. If I'm off by even a couple of inches, I'm going to end up turning myself into kindling. I don't see any other possible way out of this, though, so it's a risk that I'm going to have to take. Gritting my teeth, I once again lift my feet off the ground so that I'm hanging by my hands. Using the tips of my feet, I begin to swing my body back and forth. Each time that I come forward, I lean into the motion to make myself travel further. It takes a bit of trial and error, but eventually I get the rhythm down and I'm rocking back and forth on the rope like a coked-out Tarzan. I'm just starting to believe that I can't move the rope enough to make my plan work when suddenly I'm falling through the air towards the far side of the room. I pass dangerously close to the fire before narrowly missing it and crashing into a wall. The impact stuns me for a moment, and I have to wait for the stars of my vision to fade before getting back to my feet. The rope is still tied around my hands. I'm not hanging from the ceiling anymore, though, and that's the important part. There's a closed door near me. Before I open it, I take a moment to get a better look at the markings on the wall. I reach out with one finger and touch the closest one. It's been drawn with blood. There's nothing subtle about the shapes. They're crude drawings depicting a group of people worshipping a tall figure with a skull-like face. The figure is surrounded by flames, and those same flames adorn the heads of the worshippers like fiery crowns. On the wall closest to where I'd been hanging, there's a bloody mural of a man being sacrificed. He's suspended over a large bonfire, and the same skull-faced figure from the first set of drawings is overseeing the procedure with a wide grin. It's not hard to guess that I'm intended to be the one roasting in the flames. I wonder if that's what happened to the people that Pembrook sent to Broken Bend before me. If the wolf hadn't intervened and forced whatever I'd been injected with out of my system. That doesn't matter right now. What matters is getting the fuck out of here before my captors come back. I go over the door and press my ear up against it. I don't hear anything on the other side, but it's hard to hear much of anything over the roar of the fire. Turning the handle, I open it slowly before going out into the hallway. The passage is small and cramped. Without any light sources, it's also incredibly dark. I go back into the room I had been trapped in and carefully extract a single burning branch from the fire. It's a bit difficult with my hands still tied together. I have to be careful to make sure the length of rope doesn't get caught in the flames. With my makeshift torch in hand, I return to the hallway and work my way down it. I move cautiously, and it takes me a few minutes to reach the end of the corridor. It terminates in another door. Setting the torch down on the stone floor, I open it, wincing at the screech the old hinges make as they swing. There are lit lanterns inside this room, so I don't need to retrieve the burning branch. This room is smaller than the one I had woken up in. In the center is a stone altar, the gray rock stained dark with blood. It isn't large enough for a human body to fit on, and I wonder what exactly it's used for. Whatever its purpose is, it's clear from the fresh ichor that it's been used recently. Hanging from the left wall are a series of sharp instruments. I don't recognize a number of them, namely the ones that look like twisted fire pokers with clamps. My eyes fall on a long black serrated knife. Hurrying over to it, I remove it from its hook and carefully turn it in my hand so that I can use it to cut through my bonds. It's difficult work, and I have to move slowly to avoid cutting myself because of the awkward angle I have to hold it at, but eventually I manage to slice through enough of the rope to free my hands. I've just finished when the door opposite of the one I came through opens. A man dressed in a black robe comes into the room. He obviously wasn't expecting to see me here, as he turns towards me in surprise and takes an involuntary step backwards. Before he can say or do anything, I'm rushing forward and plunging the serrated knife into the side of his neck. I clamp my free hand down over his mouth and hold him up against the wall until his feeble struggling ceases and his eyes close. I pull the knife free and allow his lifeless body to slide down to the ground. I pull back the hood he's wearing and get a better look at his face. I don't recognize the man. He's definitely not one of the people that attacked me back at the bar. There's no point in staying here. I go out the door he entered through and climb the stairs on the other side. These lead to yet another door. There's a dim light coming from underneath this one, and I can feel fresh air blowing through the cracks. It has to lead outside. I open the door a few inches and peer out. I'm at what looks like some kind of camp. About a dozen buildings stand next to each other in a large circle, with a huge bonfire burning in the center. Thick woods surround the clearing. People in the same black robes as the man I just killed are walking from building to building, some in groups and some individually. 4 of them are busy erecting tall poles around the fire and securing them so that they stand upright. Everyone seems to be in a hurry to make preparations for something, as the last of the daylight is fading from the sky. I close the door and lean up against it as I mentally run through my options. The beginnings of a plan are starting to form. I dress myself in the dead man's robe. It's dark enough outside that no one will be able to see my face with the hood pulled up. I can blend in just long enough to escape this camp, then I can't. My thoughts are interrupted as I feel my heart skip. It's quickly followed by the feeling of needles prickling the skin of my arms and legs. I sit down the stairs and take a deep breath. I know what these sensations are, and I know what they lead to. It doesn't make any sense, though. The change isn't supposed to happen until tomorrow. Wait, how long was I out after being drugged? I'd been out for over 24 hours? I think back to how the wolf had pulled me back to consciousness. The closer we get to the time of transformation, the more influence the wolf was able to have over me. How much time passing would explain how I was able to overpower the drugs. I get back to my feet and return to the room at the bottom of the stairs. I smile to myself as I do so. These people made a mistake by not immediately killing me. In a few minutes, they're going to find out just how big of a mistake it was. We need to work together, I say to the wolf as I close myself in the altar room. We still need to figure out what's going on in this town. If we're still in Broken Bend, anyway. I hear a rumbling growl, not in my ears, but instead inside of my mind. Oh yes, I agree with the wolf, feeling my smile turning into something much more vicious. We most definitely still get to kill every last one of them. I can feel the beast's bloodlust growing inside of me as I get down onto my knees. We're in agreement. A bit of detective work with our carnage to fulfill both our intellectual and physical needs. With a shock that races up and down my spine, the change begins. To say the transformation is painful is an understatement. My entire body has to reconfigure itself to allow for the wolf to come out. In a very real sense, it has to break everything that is me so that something new can be born. It starts with the bones in my face. My teeth clack together as my cheekbones snap down the middle. Tears fill my eyes as my orbital bones follow. The change is happening faster than usual. The wolf is eager to be free. Thinking quickly, I pull my belt off and put the strap in my mouth. I barely manage to do so before my shoulders pop out of their sockets. I bite down into the leather and muffle my screams of pain. I feel the blood begin to run out of the corners of my mouth. One by one, the vertebrae in my back pop as my spine twists into a new shape. This process not only floods me with fresh agony, but also causes me to lose control of areas of my body momentarily as the bone presses into the cord. In some ways, this temporary paralysis is the worst part of the entire change, and I feel relief when the vertebrae lock into place in their new configuration. The final stage of this part of the process is next, and I brace myself for it as best as I can. With a flash of white-hot pain, my hips shatter. I bite down to the belt so hard that my gums start to bleed. A part of me is aware that the bones of my legs are breaking into pieces, but I'm so preoccupied with the burning in my midsection that I barely notice. The rest of my skeleton continues to break down in preparation for the wolf's emergence. This is by far the worst part. During the second part of the change, I have two sets of nerves connected to me, the ones running through my current body, the ones attached to what is replacing it. I feel pain from each set simultaneously, meaning that I experience a level of suffering that no other person can ever reach. All of them cry out as they're stretched and mangled and torn. I lose all connection with the world around me as I'm swallowed into a void of torture. There's no thought or reason, nothing but the deep and everlasting torment. I gasp as the world comes flooding back to me and the pain flows out of me. My skin is splitting open as the wolf emerges from my human husk. It's like all the pressure is being released from me. There are a few tiny discomforts as the change is completed, but within moments I feel the last of my bones click into place, and suddenly I feel incredible. I get to my feet. Everything feels so different now. Powerful. It's like I'm standing on my legs for the very first time. The lanterns in the room cast my shadow onto the wall, and for a moment I stare at the large profile. I can see the pointed ears and long jaws of the wolf, as well as the powerful body and clawed hands. There had been a time, back before I had been put on the path of a true hunter, that my werewolf form had been thin and gaunt. Now, though, my body is lean and strong, the body of a true predator. I shake the blood off my fur as I pull a strip of ruined flesh off the bottom of my muzzle. My senses are heightened far beyond what they normally are. I can hear the footsteps from people walking around outside, and the crackling of the flames from the bonfire. I smell the scents of fresh dirt and dried blood all around me. I can see every crack and gap in the wood stones that make up the room I'm standing in. It's like I'm experiencing the world for the first time. Normally, I'm not as aware as I am right now. Usually the wolf is in the driver's seat when I take on this form. At least for the moment, though, the wolf is honoring our agreement. It understands the need for us to work together to learn what has happened in Broken Bend so that we can report back to Pembrook. Time for that investigation will come shortly. First things first, though. It's time to teach these assholes a very important and very permanent lesson. The wolf snarls in approval. Running on all fours, I charge up the stairs and burst through the wooden door at the top, sending shards of wood and metal flying in every direction. The robed figures around the fire stop what they're doing and stare at me in complete surprise. I glare at them with my black eyes before throwing back my head and howling a bloodthirsty challenge. I'm moving towards the nearest cultist before he can grasp what's happening. My claws dig into his chest, and with little effort I tear him in half. Blood and gore spray in every direction. I drop the remains of the body as I feel the exhilaration of the kill flowing through me. I'm already moving on to the next one. This one manages to get his hands up, but hands are just flesh over bone, and the wolf can't be stopped by such easily severed things. Cultist screams until his throat is torn out and his head separated from his shoulders. The other robed figures are getting over the shock of my appearance now, and they are quickly advancing towards me with all manner of weapons. They're carrying everything from shovels to knives similar to the one that I'd used to cut through my bindings. Surprisingly, none of them seem to have guns. It wouldn't matter if they did, of course. Nothing short of a high-powered shotgun blast at point-blank range can do any real damage to me, and even then it's nothing permanent. There's something about werewolf skin that absorbs and distributes impact in such a way as to make bullets trivial. Stabbing weapons such as knives are a bit more effective, but those have a different sort of disadvantage for the attacker. Those take hands to hold them and arms to lift them, and I'm very good at making limbs go away. I take a mental step back and allow the wolf to join me. Not for the first time. We notice how fluid our movements are. There's no wasted motion. We move from cultist to cultist like water flowing over rocks, claws and fangs singing as they tear and slice and rip. The wolf is an artist in the medium of carnage. When the last of the row people fall, we look around and spot a man dressed in a uniform slowly walking towards us. The wolf grins broadly, exposing its rows of teeth. It's Sheriff Garrett, the man that had drugged us. Now is our chance to thank him properly. Garrett doesn't seem to be afraid of the wolf. He walks calmly towards us, removing his coat as he does so. He lets it drop to the ground and removes his tie as well before rolling up his shirt sleeves. When he is less than a dozen feet away from us, he stops and cracks his neck. Furious at the sign of disrespect, the wolf lunges forward. With superhuman speed, Garrett steps out of the way and slams his fist into our side. The blow is hard enough to knock us to the ground, and we scramble to our feet less than a second before its foot stomps down in the spot we just occupied. The wolf bares its teeth again, but doesn't immediately attack. Something is wrong with this man. That's when the scent reaches our nose. It isn't the smell of a typical human man. There's something else mixed with it. We don't recognize it, but it makes the hairs on our backs stand up. Seeing our hesitation, Garrett smiles at us and gestures for us to come at him again. The wolf charges forward. We're a cunning predator, and this time instead of blindly attacking, we wait for Garrett to move. We pivot slightly and launch ourselves towards the spot that he'll be standing on once his dodge is finished. He manages to adjust his course just in time to avoid being tackled. It isn't without a price, however. Our claws lash out, and they strip a chunk of flesh off the side of his face. He pushes us away before we can do any further damage. As he does so, the tip of our claws catches on the collar of his shirt and tears it. Removing the cloth reveals that he's wearing a necklace. It's adorned with teeth of all shapes and sizes. Some of them are human, and others are from various animals, but most of them are clearly not from anything natural. Garrett has been hunting paranormal creatures as well. He's the aggressor now, quickly closing the distance between us and striking us just under the ribs with the point of his elbow. Almost before the pain registers, he's bringing his knee up and smashing it into our jaw. Our head goes back from the impact, and he uses the opening to slam us in the throat with the palm of his hand. We choke at the sudden loss of air while bright lights flash before our eyes. We don't see him get behind us, but we certainly feel his boot connecting hard with our back before we hit the ground. His strength and speed are incredible. More than that, he knows exactly how to use these advantages. Whatever's been done to him has resulted in someone extremely dangerous, even to a creature like us. Garrett steps back into view as we are pushing ourselves up. He kicks us hard on the side of the head to put us back down. We can smell our own blood coming out of our nose and mouth. As we watch, he pulls a long hunting knife out of a pouch on his belt. The expression on his face is eager. He thinks that we're done, and he sees us as the next trophy to adorn his necklace. He's wrong. If he wants inhuman speed and strength, we'll show him what that really means. As he starts to bend over with the knife, we lunge forward and clamp our jaws around his ankle. He cries out as our teeth easily penetrate through the cloth of his pants and sink into the skin and muscle. We pull him off of his feet while simultaneously getting back to ours, never letting go of the leg in the process. With a hard twist, we tear off the lower half and fling it to one side. Garrett points the knife up at us as his face goes pale. We bring our foot down on his wrist and pin his arm to the ground. Bring our face down close to his. We reach out with our right hand and use the steel-like claws to easily slice the arm free from his shoulder. He opens his mouth to scream, but no sound comes out. The veins in his neck bulge, and his eyes roll wildly in their sockets. He no longer interests the wolf. He is beaten, and there is no point in torturing him. The joy is in the hunt and the kill. We grip his head in both hands and crush it inward until he stops moving. More cultists have arrived. They all keep their distance as we watch them warily. They start to chant something that we can't quite make out. The noise grows louder and louder until I'm able to determine that they're saying the same word over and over again. Maukaleth. The bonfire in the center of the camp begins to grow taller and brighter. Scents in the air rapidly change from the smell of the trees and soil and smoke to things more foreign. Much like the scent from Garrett, we don't recognize these, but there's something familiar about them. It's like there's something deep within us, something built into us, that understands what these smells mean. Images of raging blazes burning in infinite darkness fill our mind. The chanting reaches a deafening level. The cultists raise their arms and the bonfire explodes, sending flaming debris in all directions. We raise a hand to protect our face from the shrapnel. The fire spreads across the ground as it forms a circular inferno in the center of the camp. Everything around us falls silent. For a moment, we're sure that we've gone deaf. The crackling of the fire can no longer be heard, nor can the cultists chanting or even the beating of our own heart. At the same time, a great pressure pushes down on us. No, it's not just us. It's everything. The cultists are driven down to their knees before they lay flat on the ground. The wood of the buildings around us crack and break, and we can see small branches snapping off of nearby trees. It's only with extreme difficulty that we're able to remain standing, and even with all of our effort, we have to get onto all fours to do so. Something begins to rise out of the flames. Our mind struggles to process the sight of it. It's as if the being isn't meant to be seen by mortal eyes. It's vaguely humanoid in so much as it has a central body and limbs that look like arms and legs. There's no mistaking this as anything from this world. Its black and crimson body exists and does not exist at the same time, like we're witnessing some kind of mirage created from smoke. In the center of its featureless head is a single bright red light that seems to act as some sort of eye. Two large wing-like appendages unfurl from its back. Heat radiates outward from them, and dark ash drips from them like blood. That single red point of light points directly at us. For the first time, we feel small and insignificant. The wings beat once, and a scorching wind washes over us. It burns our fur and skin. We have to look away to protect our face from it. As we watch, the buildings and trees behind us burst into flames, and the nearby cultists are instantly incinerated to the point of no longer being recognizable as human. Malkaleth is risen, and all burns before it. The wolf bares its teeth at the otherworldly creature, but we know that we can't fight this thing. All of our heightened senses are screaming at us to run, to put distance between us and this thing so that we can regroup and come up with some sort of strategy. We don't like to leave a fight. There's nothing more distasteful to us. In this case, though, we are certain that we'll die if we remain. We turn and bolt towards the woods. Surprisingly, Malkaleth doesn't give chase. As we leave the clearing and plunge into the tree line, our hearing returns and the heavy pressure abates. Our body is close to the ground as we practically fly through the forest. Our nose catches the faint sense of petroleum and concrete. We're headed in the direction of civilization. The sun is fully set and the woods are dark. Even our eyes have a difficult time seeing in the thick gloom. It's dangerous to be running as fast as we are when it's this dim, but we don't slow down. After what feels like hours, we finally emerge on the other side of the woods. In front of us is the road that we had driven into Broken Bend on, and to our right is the town itself. We hesitate. As far as we know, the camper is still parked back at the bar, but it's not like we can drive in this form. For now, it's a better idea to get as far from the town as possible and contact Pembrook when we return to human form in the morning. The ground heaves, nearly throwing us from our feet. Even before we can steady ourselves, the road in front of us erupts with flames, the concrete splitting as hot boiling liquid pours out onto it. Like a god who has come to pass judgment, Malkaleth rises from the fiery crater and spreads its wings wide. All the plant life around us is instantly reduced to ash. Malkaleth reaches out with one hand and grabs us by the throat. Its grip is inescapable, and it burns hotter than any furnace. We cry out in agony as the hand tightens further. A part of us smells the scent of burning fur in the air as we struggle in vain. Malkaleth's wings beat again. Our cries turn to screams. Flesh is burning off of our body. In desperation, we claw at the hand holding us. We can't break its grip, but our efforts don't go unnoticed. Its wings pull back before coming forward to create a burning wind with the force of a hurricane. It opens its hand and the gust carries us away as if we're a leaf blowing in a breeze. We hit the concrete hard a great distance from where we started and skid to a stop dozens of feet from the impact point. The entire time, the burning is continuing. Even now that we're far from Malkaleth, the fire and heat continues to eat away at our body. It's all-consuming. All the fur has been burned away, and our skin is burning down to the bone. It isn't stopping. It's happening faster and faster. Within moments, we're going to succumb to this insatiable hellfire. Something else is happening as well. We feel our connection starting to fade. Whatever Malkaleth has done to us, it's burning both our body and our bond. It feels like our very souls are being melted away. The wolf is silent for a moment before sighing. Wait, I choke out through the agony. What are you? The air rushes out of our lungs as our body splits open down the middle. There's a new pain now as bones reconfigure and organs stretch and retract. The scream that sounds much different as it comes out from another throat. I emerge from the wolf and lie coughing on the ground. I'm alone. I can no longer hear the wolf in my head or feel its presence inside of me. The feeling of burning is gone, but I would have welcomed it back to sense the wolf again. The wolf sacrificed itself to trigger the change early so that I can live. I'm not unscathed. My body is covered in severe burns. I can smell the charred flesh even without my heightened senses. My vision is blurry. I know that I only have moments before I pass out. Malkaleth or one of its followers will be able to kill me without a fight. Not that I had been able to do anything against it when I wasn't in such bad shape. It's okay. This is okay. I'm following the wolf to wherever it's gone. I only wish that its sacrifice meant more. Not for myself, but for it. It had wanted me to live. I'm sorry, old friend. There's a loud screeching sound as a car slams to a stop next to me. I'm too weak to lift my head, and my eyelids close. Right before I slip into the darkness, I hear a voice above me and feel a hand on my shoulder. Help me get him into the car, a man says. Everything fades to nothing.